Now that we are in full-blown winter across most of the country, I've had a lot of people asking me about how they can sleep warm when they go camping and backpacking. Should I get a 0-degree bag, they ask? And I've got the answer. Before I started the Appalachian Trail, one of my biggest fears about backpacking was the potential for hypothermia. I was terrified that I would just die in my sleep of being too cold, because even when I was doing a lot of training hikes on the AT, I found that I was chilly and I slept cold, and I thought that's just me. I just sleep cold. I'm a cold sleeper. And that wasn't necessarily the case. The case was that I didn't know how to sleep warm. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've learned, and these are tips that I give my customers when they come into the outfitter looking for ways to stay warm, because they have the same fear that I did. How do I stay warm? I don't want to go camping and be cold and miserable the whole time. And I agree, because if you don't sleep well, you don't hike well. And so getting a really good night's sleep is vital to having a wonderful experience on the trail. So let's talk about how we can fix that. I used to sleep cold when I was camping and backpacking pretty much all the time, and I thought that it was just me. I was like, oh, it must be something about my body composition that I'm a cold sleeper. But then I learned how to sleep warm and how to stay cozy when I'm camping, whether I'm backpacking on the trail or tent camping. So this is a common problem, and it's something that I hear a lot from people, especially women who come into the outfitter trying to figure out what kind of a sleeping bag or sleep system they should get. The very common question is, do I need a 0-degree bag? And most of the time, the answer is no, you don't. In fact, a 0-degree bag is a pretty big investment for a bag that you're probably not going to be using for most of the year. Getting a 30-degree bag is much more versatile, and there are a lot of ways that you can take that 30-degree bag and make it comfortable, even when you're down into the high 20s in terms of temperature overnight. Now, if you are in a situation where you're going to be mountaineering, when you're going to be at extremely high elevations or intense conditions weather-wise, then yes, maybe you want a 0-degree bag, or maybe even a warmer bag. And there are other things that you will do to protect yourself in those kind of conditions. But the average person who goes out to have a good time on the weekend or to take a short backpacking trip does not need that kind of a bag. And the downside of a bag that is 0 degrees or less is that it's going to take up a lot of space in your bag. Even if it's down and you can compress it down pretty small, it is going to be a lot bigger than a 15 or even a 30-degree bag. My go-to and the recommendation I give most folks is to start with a good quality 30-degree sleeping bag, and then add a liner to it. And there are different types of sleeping bag liners. I personally use a silk one, and I use it year-round because I can sleep in it in the summertime when I'm too hot and I don't want to be under my quilt or in a sleeping bag. The silk liner adds about 7 degrees of warmth. It sounds like maybe not a lot, but it's enough to really make a difference for me in terms of comfort. When we're thinking about sleeping bag liners, there are all different kinds, and a lot of them will say the temperature. They used to say a temperature rating on them, like it adds 10 degrees or 15 degrees. And now typically you will find them where they say warm, warmer, and warmest. I don't know if that's because they didn't want people calling them out on not having an exact temperature degree rating. I don't know why they'd made that change, but basically it gives you a guideline for what the conditions are going to be, and whether you want to be slightly warmer than the rating for your bag, or a lot warmer, or the warmest you can possibly be with a liner. Another advantage of a liner is that it keeps the inside of your bag clean, so you don't have to wash your bag as often. And it's easy just to pull it out and throw it in the washing machine when you get home from your trip, and then it's clean and you don't have to worry about the bag at all. I also make sure that I am wearing wool layers to sleep in, especially if it's damp out. So I'll wear wool leggings and a long sleeve wool top just to keep me warm, even if it's a little bit wet outside. And I wear wool socks to sleep in, and I make sure that they are not too tight, because if they're tight and they're right up against your skin and they're squeezing, that might be fine for hiking, but for sleeping, you want to have a little bit of a looser fit so that you've got some air circulating around your feet. And the same goes for the clothes that you wear. You don't want them to be skin tight. You want that air layer. If you are in a smaller tent, you're also going to be able to warm up the air inside the tent a little bit more than if you're in a bigger tent and your body's got to work harder to kind of warm up the space around you. But when it comes to the sleeping bag, if you've got a good quality one, then you can use that in the spring, you can use it in the fall, you can use it in the summer. Some of the tricks that you want to employ are to make sure that you have a good sleeping pad or mat underneath you. And this is something that a lot of people don't realize is hypercritical to sleeping comfortably, especially when it's cold outside. You can get a sleeping pad that is rated with about an 8.4 R value. Nemo makes one of those. There is a Thermarest X-Therm, which I personally use. That's, I believe it's 7.3. I'll put that down below so you can see what the exact rating is on that. And the reason that that is so important is because, especially in the spring when it's starting to warm up, the ground is still cold. And in areas where the temperatures in the wintertime get down in the 20s or below, or when you have a lot of snow on the ground, that ground is going to stay cold even when the air starts to warm up. When you have a beautiful day out and you're like, oh, this is a perfect weekend to go backpacking. If that ground is cold and you lay down on that without really any protection between you and the ground, you can be in a 0-degree bag and still be very cold. Any bag that you have, when you lay on the down or the insulation that is underneath you and it compresses, it's going to reduce how well that keeps you warm. So you'll have your layer on the top that's keeping you nice and toasty, but if you don't have anything underneath you to protect you, then you're going to tend to sleep cold. So make sure that you have a very good sleeping pad. If you've got one that's kind of in the middle, like a 3 or a 4 R value, you can enhance that by either taking a closed cell foam pad and putting it underneath, putting a piece of Tyvek underneath. That will help just create a little bit of a barrier. Or, and this is a trick that most people don't know, you can take an emergency blanket, the little Mylar blankets that pack up about this big. You can take one of those, and I carry one anyway just for emergencies. If you put that on the floor of your tent underneath your sleeping pad, that is going to reflect some of the heat back to your body or the cold back to the ground, depending on which way you orient it. So that can also just provide an ultra thin layer of protection to keep you a little bit warmer. Now, a lot of people also recommend doing things like taking a Nalgene bottle and filling it with warm water and putting it in your sleeping bag. I don't do that because I definitely don't want a bottle that might potentially leak in my sleeping bag or in my quilt. I do not want to be wet when I want to be warm. So instead, do a few jumping jacks before you go to bed. Get your blood flowing a little bit. Do things that are going to increase your metabolism a bit, like eating a piece of candy or something, having a candy bar before you go to bed. Once you've got your metabolism going a little bit, when you get into bed, you're going to warm up the surrounding area more quickly. So inside your bag, inside your liner, it's going to get warm a little bit faster, which will make it easier for you to go to sleep. And then you'll cool down as you sleep a little bit, but typically people sleep better when they're slightly cooler to begin with, so it shouldn't be an issue for you. And if you do have to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom or something, then just close up your bag. Don't throw it out and lay it open while you leave your tent. Cover it up so that when you get back in, most of that warmth will still be in there for you. Another trick that I use is using my puffy jacket. I typically don't wear that when I'm hiking. I do wear it around camp, and I will take a down puffy. This is a synthetic one, but I hike with a down one. I'll put that over my hips because I tend to get kind of cold in this area, and I find that makes a huge difference. I will sleep with a beanie on my head. I will sleep with a neck gaiter if I feel like I need to, and I can bring that up over my face. You definitely don't want to pull your sleeping bag or your quilt up over your face because that hot, warm breath that you're expelling into the sleeping bag is just going to make it wet and make you less comfortable rather than more comfortable. But if you've got something that you can pull up, like a neck gaiter, or even a piece of clothing that you can lay over your face and it's feeling real cold around your face, then that's going to help protect you a little bit. But then you can move it away when you get warm again. I also have Raynaud syndrome, which is a circulatory issue, and it tends to make your extremities go numb. And I did a video about that a while ago, which you can see up here if you're curious. But because of that, I sleep in gloves almost year round, really, even sometimes in the summertime, because as you start to cool down, you can have that numbness and it's not pleasant. I do that. Not everybody needs to do that, but it's good to have those. And if you're taking them with you backpacking anyway, why not use them at night to help keep you warm? I have been in my tent, in my quilt, and I have woken up with frost on my quilt, literally frost. I was like, what is that? It didn't snow inside my tent, did it? But sometimes that happens. But if you've got a good sleep system, you're going to be warm even when a situation like that arises. And the thing to do to make sure that you're warm the next night is to just take that bag or quilt out of your pack the next day when you've got a sunny spot. Even if it's still cold, if you've got a sunny, breezy spot, you can just lay it out on a rock, sit and have a nice break, let it dry, and then put it back in your pack so that it is dry when you're going to sleep the next night, because you don't want to go to sleep with wet gear if you can help it at all, because you are going to be much more prone to being cold or even potentially hypothermia. Another trick that I've used that is one that most people don't know about is that you can lay a blanket over your sleeping bag, or you can take a lightweight down quilt, even if it's not a actual backpacking quilt. Like Costco makes some little down quilts that are nice and they pack down real small. When I was on the AT and I ended up hiking in November trying to do some makeup miles and get finished up, it was getting pretty cold out. And I was in the grocery store one day doing a resupply, and they had just had a bin there of these little fleece blankets for like $3 or something. And I was like, that's a brilliant idea. Let me grab that. And it fit just fine in my pack. And I laid it over my quilt at night. And just that little extra bit of fleece made a huge difference in terms of how comfortable I felt. Now, if you are using a quilt, you want to be sure that you're not having drafts, because the drafts coming up under the quilt, if you don't use the straps to tuck it under your pad, are going to make you feel colder. I do have straps that I can use, but I also, because I'm using that liner, I find that just that thin little layer of silk, it makes a big difference in terms of me not feeling any drafts that may come in. So I use the straps that wrap around my quilt, tuck it underneath. I use the liner, and I use the wool clothing, the beanie, the gloves, and I am warm and toasty. And oftentimes I'll find myself, I'm warmer than I expect to be, and I end up throwing layers off in the night to stay comfortable. But then in the morning I can put them back on again and snuggle up and warm up as I wake up. I hope that's helpful to you in terms of finding a good way to sleep more comfortably in the wintertime when you're camping and backpacking. I hope you stay cozy and enjoy your next trip all that much more, and I look forward to seeing you here again next time.